The open world genre may be poo-pooed by the masses a lot of the time, but hey, there's a reason why it's so popular. People wouldn't be going feral for GTA 6 if there wasn't something inherently compelling about open world gameplay. It's just that for the last decade or so, we've had a lot of bad ones. And with the next generation of consoles looming on the horizon like a big old scary creature, and with them a buttload of open world games to hunker down and become very gross and smelly playing, it's worth taking a look at some of the mistakes the last generation made, and what we definitely do not want on the menu going forward. I'm Ewan, you're watching What Culture Gaming, and here are 10 open world game tropes we never want to see again.
It's more important than ever to get yourself a VPN. With NordVPN, you can protect your data and keep up with region-locked TV and content. Best of all, you can get signed up for 2 years of Nord with an up to 76% discount and 4 months off, plus a $50 Amazon gift card. All you have to do is click the link below or scan the QR code on screen now to make the most of this great deal.
Number 10. It gets good after the first 24 hours, guys, I promise. Okay, so while I do appreciate getting bang for my buck when it comes to open world titles, there's a difference between having lots of fun, dynamic, and compelling content and just having a lukewarm buffet you have to pick away at until you get to the good stuff. Sadly though, a whole hell of a lot of open world titles have opted for the more for the sake of more approach, and that can often lead to a situation where the actual good stuff doesn't kick in until a ridiculous amount of playtime has been invested. Or it could be some kind of gaming Stockholm syndrome, I don't know. Case in point, even well-reviewed games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey had fans online saying, "Stick with it, guys! It really opens up after the first 2 days of playing," which is like, who has time for that? And more to the point, who actually wants to spend 24 hours slogging around in the hope that at some point they'll get strapped into that 2001 Space Odyssey massage chair Homer finds and embark on an epic experience? Okay, so 24 hours or 2 days might be a bit of an exaggeration, but the fact remains a lot of open world games in recent memory have come out the gates all gassy and bloated. Take a leaf out of Joe Don Baker's book In Cape Fear, have him slug a Pepto-Bismol whiskey, and let's start hitting the ground running, okay? Number 9. Ubisoft Icon Syndrome. By their nature, open-world games are frequently packed with things to keep track of, including, but not limited to, main objectives, side gigs, fast travel points, procedurally generated errands, vendors, properties, and so on and so forth. In theory, it makes perfect sense to display these opportunities on the world map so that players can see precisely what's available and what the best ways are for getting to those destinations. In practice, though, numerous open-world overviews, such as those in Cyberpunk 2077 and every Far Cry game to have existed, become so cluttered that even just thinking about them is gonna give your noggin a flogging. Not only does this practice make it difficult to discern what's happening on the map, but it can even lead to analysis paralysis, that is, being unable to choose from an overwhelming number of options. Yes, it's often possible to turn off specific marker categories so that people are shown only what's important to them, but those settings can reset every time the world map is closed, which I don't need to tell you is downright annoying. More innovative genre titles, such as Ghost of Tsushima, have pioneered novel ways of guiding players to different points of interest, deploying environmental clues and even the geography of the world itself to avoid HUD and map clutter. This ultimately makes for a more immersive and well-paced experience, as players are less concerned with getting from A to B and get to chart their own path through the world, appreciating scenery and encouraging emergent narratives along the way. As an aside, next time you jump into Skyrim, try navigating the open world without fast travel and by using the road signage. If you can put up with all those desperate skooma skeevers, you may just see the game in a whole new light. Number 8. Overly large and lifeless maps. For as problematic as inflated playtimes and world maps might be, having overly large yet lifeless worlds is equally disappointing. The definition of that bit in Uncut Gems where Kevin Garnett is like, "Why show it to me if I can't have it?" The point of an open world experience is for it to be alive and immersive. Beyond accomplishing this with loads of activities, developers might fill environments with wildlife, bustling pedestrians, and traffic, associated items to collect, and enticing visual and auditory details. You know, things that coalesce to give the impression of a living, breathing arena to exist in. But that frustratingly isn't always the case. Recent titles like Halo Infinite and Starfield, to name but a few, put size over substance by not providing players with enough to see and do as they move between areas. In contrast, the Red Dead Redemption series and No Man's Sky purposefully use their barren vastness to bolster discovery and authenticity. Likewise, Immortals Phoenix Rising and Sleeping Dogs demonstrate how fulfilling it can be to emphasize smaller places with plenty to uncover. Honestly, trekking through most of these vacant terrains is like walking around an empty mansion. The scale is impressive, and yeah, it's nice to have like 6 bathrooms, but what's the point if there's little to enjoy inside? This lesson even appears to have been heeded by Mafia developers Hangar 13, with its next release, Mafia: The Old Country, doing away with an open world after criticism of empty environs was leveled at Mafia 3 and Mafia: The Definitive Edition. Great games, but the open worlds could have had more. Same with my beloved LA Noire. Let me go in a coffee shop and read about the Red Scare, dagnabbit. Number 7. Too many weapons! Acquiring new equipment, clothing, and collectibles as you dive deeper into an open world game can be pretty cool, with a seemingly limitless number of possibilities for designing a unique character, customizing playstyles and strategies, and hunting for secret treasures scattered around miscellaneous sites. Good word, that. Miscellaneous. Miscellaneous. Miscellaneous! That said, the sheer volume of items to obtain, sell, discard, and/or compare and contrast with in modern games has become an issue. Like, we're all Hans Moleman, and we're all like, give us the biggest open world game you have. Only to go, no, that's too big. Strike 2 on the Simpsons reference counter here. I'm anything if not original. As the quintessential looter-shooter franchise, the Borderlands series was built upon the gimmick of having a whole lot of guns to find. However, Borderlands 3's alleged 1 billion variations is clearly an example of quantity over quality, with players' inventories inevitably bursting with firearms whose technical and/or aesthetic differences are negligible or even indecipherable. Also, other games with loot systems like Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, sorry to hit you with that jump scare there, just giving you pure crap for no reason. Like, oh wow, that gun is purple, and you've given me another that's green at the same time, and I'm probably gonna get another 5 minutes from now. Can't wait to open up my menu and manage that inventory again. Number 6. Brainless weapon selections. Gonna go out on a limb here and say this is probably the most controversial entry on this list, and I know the answer is probably just because I'm a freak, does anyone else hate it when you have like too many weapons on you at once? Like the opposite of Moe when he has 2 knives in The Simpsons. You give me a selection of things on my person at any one time, and I'm gonna be like, why? Why do I need that much? That's too much. Also, hit the Simpsons klaxon again. Couldn't even. Last one entry, could I? Stupid, stupid, stupid. Look, what I'm getting at here isn't that it can't be fun to have total freedom to equip whatever weapon you want at a moment's notice, like in GTA 5. But there's a lot more to be said about having to choose your weaponry and really think about a given encounter. I'd shout out Red Dead 2 as being a great example of this, which it is, but even then, I kind of think that game over-equips you with stuff too. Do we really need to have 2 long-arm weapons? It's just a bit overkill. Like, every mission I'd try to go in with just my revolvers and maybe 1 long arm, but it would spawn me in with 2 of the blighters. And I'm just going there, I don't need that many guns, Dutch. And the game is fighting me back, giving me tuberculosis and saying, I need more guns, Arthur. Bad. Annoying. And ultimately, I kind of think this is mostly about trust. Trust the player to adapt if they use the wrong weapon. Trust them to play how they want to play. Too much stuff, it's just a faff. Also, for all you Looney Tunes fans out there, that this kind of makes me feel like the Acme chairman in Looney Tunes Back in Action when Wile E. Coyote has the pendulum of doom, and he's all like, oh look, it's the pendulum of doom. What's the pendulum of doom doing there? I didn't order it. It's overkill. Get rid of it. That's how I feel playing these games. Number 5. Stranger in a Strange Land protagonists. Seeing as how players intrinsically begin open-world expeditions as new arrivals in an enormous, complicated, and often unfamiliar universe, it's fitting to have them inhabit the role of a protagonist who's in the same situation. You know, the whole, oh, you're finally awake routine. Of course, that circumstance can manifest in several ways, such as with the main character being a fresh-faced outsider thrust into a foreign place, or a dishonored outcast returning home after many years to right wrongs and fix their reputation. Either way, they're a stranger in a strange land who saves the community by the end of their journey. It's an alluring way to get the story going, but it's also a decades-long trope that's been done to death. For instance, every Far Cry release relies on this cliché, as do many of the RPGs in Bethesda's back catalog. Nearly all of those titles, as well as countless others that could have been mentioned, are good or even great, but their dependence on this same setup means that they're at least a bit too formulaic and familiar. Obviously, you can just choose to ignore this aspect if you're in an RPG and doing your own headcanon narrative, but come on, these sorts of games should be bearing that in mind as well. In short, just because the player is a newcomer doesn't mean the protagonist can't start out already acclimated to their setting. Number 4. Unclear on-screen navigation. Arguably, the main draw of open-world games is the ability to get lost in the landscape and do whatever the hell you want. Naturally, that can involve charting a unique path to a mission, or mucking around for hours and potentially coming across new secrets, missions, and random weird happenings, like a vampire who's sucking people's blood. Scared the hell out of me in Red Dead. In other words, half of the fun is the freedom to meander around town and explore without stipulations about where you should be heading. That's why there's a sizable portion of the online gaming sphere who feel that waypoints, quest markers, and the like are counterintuitive to the experience and diminish players' enjoyment. What's more egregious is when those things are displayed via imperceptible on-screen navigation that leads players to wander aimlessly and annoyed as they figure out where the hell to go and what the hell they need to do. Usually, this is indicated by a small dot that too rarely makes it clear where exactly the character needs to go once they're in the general vicinity of a given objective. Should they go upstairs or downstairs? Is the item they're looking for buried beneath some rubble? Or, God, it's just a fool's errand trying to guess sometimes, and the tiny arrows that show up alongside the indicator aren't often much help. Number 3, needless tutorials. Okay, so I don't know if you know this, but video games, they're kind of old, and the majority of gamers are probably familiar with how to play them by the time they boot up their first open-world title. If not, they're likely intuitive enough to figure it out as they go and engaged enough to have some fun in that process. That's why it's such a needlessly archaic and aggravating problem whenever our initial hours of playtime are impeded by dull, redundant, and overly demanding tutorials that reveal obvious mechanics, information, and tips that are kind of just really obvious. At the very least, it'd be nice if devs could do away with telling us about basic movement, as well as what health, stamina, and special ability meters actually mean. Like, the novel and complex stuff? Sure, give me the lowdown. But not the basic gubbins. We've done all of that. Get it gone. Get it out. Yeah! It's gone now. I fixed the problem. You're welcome. Number 2. Excessively complicated crafting and upgrade systems. Role-playing games are labeled as such because they let players modify party members with unique sets of skills, traits, attire, weapons, and other distinguishing features. It's a cool and enticing level of customizable freedom, which is why it's not surprising that many modern open-world games contain similar types of complex crafting and upgrade mechanics. Those inclusions can be welcomed ways to enhance the experience if they aren't overly time-consuming or complicated. As time goes on, though, it seems like open-world devs feel obligated to outdo each other when it comes to giving gamers hundreds of cumbersome and puzzling ways to differentiate their characters. An argument could be made that despite their inherent makeup, even newer open-world RPGs like Cyberpunk 2077 are bogged down by excessively convoluted and deliberately opaque systems that require players to jump through myriad hoops to unlock more abilities and evolutions. Even more gratuitous is when a series that barely tapped into those RPG elements at first eventually succumbs to the pressures of following the trend. For instance, note the progression from the beginning of Far Cry to Far Cry 6, or obviously Assassin's Creed to Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Valhalla, and where do we go wrong? Point is, sometimes having too much control can diminish the good stuff, not make it better. And number 1, copious amounts of bugs. Of all the tropes discussed on this list, this is the one that we kinda just need to kill with hammers, you know? Just really get in there. Like, bam, you know? Because they suck, even if they are really funny. Bethesda is the most notorious developer when it comes to this problem, as Elder Scrolls and Fallout were almost expected to come with technical issues when they launch. In fact, it's kind of a beloved feature of those franchises, as Bethesda jank is a charming consequence, potentially, of the studio putting out such immersive and ambitious releases, including 2023's faulty Starfield. But those titles aren't the only ones to perpetuate the problem. In the last 10 years alone, gamers have dealt with graphical and /or mechanical flaws in Cyberpunk 2077, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, Mass Effect Andromeda, Assassin's Creed Unity, and Watch Dogs, among many, many other bad culprits. At their worst, these defects break the game, and even when they're merely amusing shortcomings, they still encapsulate the industry's growing prioritization of quantity over quality and of rushing stuff to release. Here's an idea: why not reduce the scope and complexity of these titles so that they work straight out of the box? You know, like video games used to? Like a long time ago? Am I the only one who remembers that? Guys?